What's up guys, Aaron here, back with another video. Today's video is the full review of the Apple HomePod, so stick around. Welcome back, and before we begin the review portion of the video, let's take a closer look at the HomePod itself. If you're looking at HomePod from the front, it looks like a speaker with no controls that's wrapped in a seamless mesh fabric. Located on the bottom is the Apple logo as well as your personalized serial number. Now HomePod is mostly voice activated, however you can tap the top of HomePod to play, pause, skip a song, or adjust the volume. Touch and hold the top to talk to Siri. You know Siri is listening by the LED waveform that animates with every word. And lastly, on the back is the power cord that Apple recommends that you don't remove, however it is removable. And the cord itself is made out of a very high quality woven material. Now that we've gotten more familiar with the HomePod, let's begin the review portion of the video. Like with any product, there's things that I do and don't like about the HomePod. So first we'll get into the things that I do like, and then we'll talk about the things that I don't like. So the first thing that I don't like about the HomePod is the price. The HomePod costs $349 in the United States, making it one of the most expensive smart speakers available. After using it for a week, I'd have to say that it's definitely worth the price tag, however I'd like to see it priced around $250. The second thing that I don't like about it is that it doesn't ship with the ability to pair two HomePods together. And I know it's coming later on in the year with AirPlay 2, and you can also use the Mac app Airfoil. However, I wish that feature was available natively at launch. The next thing that I don't like is that you can't use HomePod as a normal Bluetooth speaker. I think Apple could have sold thousands of more HomePods if they would have had the ability to connect to any device, even if they had to add a physical 3.5mm headphone jack. Now I'm pretty sure I know why Apple did this, and that was to generate the need to purchase an Apple Music subscription, which Apple has expressed that they're reaching the pinnacle in terms of hardware design, so Apple will heavily focus in the future on making revenue through software via subscriptions rather than focusing on revenue through hardware. So I understand that Apple wants to push their Apple Music subscription service. However, I would have liked to see HomePod have the option to connect to a device strictly through Bluetooth. The next thing that I don't like is there's no multi-user support. Now, unfortunately, HomePod doesn't recognize the difference between certain voices, and once you've signed in, anyone can access Siri on HomePod, and all songs played influences your future song recommendations. The default option during setup is to enable personal requests, which lets you and any other person talk to HomePod to send messages, set reminders, or take notes, which stop working once your iPhone is out of range of HomePod. The only fix we found so far is to disable personal requests in the Home app. Now that we've talked about the things that I don't like about the HomePod, let's go ahead and talk about the things that I do like. So the first thing that I like is the sound quality. Now this thing sounds amazing. Everything from the highs to the bass, the sound is amazing. With HomePod having the ability to adjust and produce the best acoustics for the area you place it in is an amazing feature that works great. HomePod sounds amazing even at max volume, which is only achieved by having high quality internal components. The smart speaker produces crystal clear sound in terms of frequency levels and has impressed quite a few of my family members, so when it comes to sound quality, the HomePod will definitely not disappoint. The next thing I like is how easy the HomePod pairs with your iPhone. Now if you own a pair of AirPods, then you'll be familiar instantly with the pairing process for the HomePod. You simply place your iPhone next to the HomePod, and a tile pops up asking if you'd like to pair your HomePod, which then first makes sure your iPhone software is up to date, then connects via iCloud and asks what services you would like to connect, such as access to send text messages and access notes and reminders, then you're up and running. The next thing that I like is the amount of weight that it has to it. Now if you know anything about speakers, then you know that the heavier the speaker, the better the build quality in terms of the internal cone, magnet, the pole plate, and the voice coil. Apple really spent time making this an excellent sounding speaker, and the weight is a good example of Apple sourcing excellent parts, and of course they own Beats, so they have a dedicated department for audio as well. The next thing that I like is how useful HomePod is. The ability to set reminders, alarms, and read text messages are all great features, and that's not all HomePod can do. It can also utilize Apple's HomeKit features to control appliances in your home. You can play podcasts, or HomePod can read you the latest news. You can connect HomePod to your Mac and also to your Apple TV and use it as a sound bar. When using Siri, you can tell even though she's more limited than the version of Siri on the iPhone, she sounds more realistic than she's ever sounded. The next thing I like is how good Siri listens for your voice while playing music at high volume. The HomePod does a great job of determining the difference between your voice and the music playing, which this feature and the automatic room acoustic adjustment features are the features that make the HomePod look smart. And to be completely honest, those two features, coupled with excellent sound quality, is what has personally impressed me about HomePod. Some of the things Apple can do to improve HomePod 2 is to add the ability to make a phone call from it, make it available in more colors, add full Bluetooth support, multi-user support, better Apple ecosystem integration. For instance, with Apple TV, you can connect HomePod to it and use it as a soundbar, but imagine if you could tell Siri to open Netflix on Apple TV, or when my phone rings, you should be able to tell Siri to answer it on HomePod. And Siri needs to get smarter if it intends to become a big player in the artificial intelligence game. With the expansion of Siri Kit and HomeKit, we'll see more appliances added to the smart home list. And lastly, my final thoughts. HomePod is Apple's first attempt at a smart speaker, and with any first-gen products, there's going to be things that are left to be desired, like the lack of ability to connect to a second HomePod for stereo sound, which again I know is coming, but it's not here now. Now, the fact that you can't initiate a phone call or set more than one timer at a time is frustrating as well. However, for what it's supposed to be, and that's a speaker, it works excellent. HomePod is for people like me, and that's someone who's a big Apple fan, and for someone who owns a lot of Apple products and utilizes Apple services such as Apple Music. Now, we're reaching a pinnacle in smartphone hardware, and I think Apple is going to start focusing more on software and subscription-based services in the future. And HomePod is a classic example of this. Apple knows that they could have made HomePod a Bluetooth-enabled speaker, or they could have even added a physical 3.5mm headphone jack, and they would have sold 5 or even 10 times as many HomePods as they have, but instead they chose to make it an Apple-exclusive product, which they hope will entice you to purchase an Apple Music subscription. Now, which I have to admit I did. Before I bought the HomePod, I wasn't a subscriber to Apple Music, and now since I purchased HomePod, I've also signed up for an Apple Music subscription. So in the end, it's a personal decision on whether you think HomePod is worth the $350 price tag. I'm going to go ahead and keep mine, and again, if you're heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem, then I'd say go for it. Now let me know down in the comments section below what your thoughts are on HomePod. Please drop a like rating down below if you liked the video. Also subscribe to the channel to be notified of future upcoming content. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Aaron, and I'll see you guys on the next one.